Welcome to this podcast. Today we're going to have Gebhardt with us. Gebhardt, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my family name is Michael Gebhardt. I'm from the United States. I've spent most of my life growing up in Florida, and I'm an avid windsurfer and kiter. I was a professional windsurfer and Olympic windsurfer. I competed in 5 Olympics. I won a couple medals, a bunch of national championships, world championship titles, and I retired at my 5th Olympics in Sydney, Australia. I started kiting around 1999. Recreationally, it was easier to travel with kite gear for fun than it was to take, shortboard windsurf gear, which is what I used to do when I was training for the Olympics. And obviously, kiting has evolved, and now kiting is sort of in the same situation that windsurfing was in the beginning stages, is trying to become an Olympic sport and trying to become more professional. And that's sort of my history.
But did you also compete against Anders Springdahl?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So all the good old boys, the old school guys, Anders Springdahl, Antoine Albeau, Robbie Nash, Pete Cabrina, Alex Aguirre. What's cool is, a lot of these guys started the kite companies.
Yeah.
Rafael Salles with F1. So these, I can't say they're all best buddies, but definitely, cross swords on the competition. I did PWA, which was the Professional Windsurfing Association. And it was really fun that, Svein Rasmussen from Starboard and Ben Severn Sail. So like the whole culture of kite surfing, people don't realize that it all came from windsurfing, because these were the guys that pushed sailing into a whole different direction. It was sort of a combination of and a sail stuck together. And I think kite surfing for me is just an evolution of windsurfing.
But Mirko Babina, I think he windsurfed also before. President of IKA. But
exactly.
What are you doing right now for living?
Well, I have a health coaching business. I do private health coaching online, and I also work with elite athletes, professional and Olympic windsurfers, and professional kiters.
Yeah.
I work with guys like Robbie Douglas, who's had the world speed record, and Nico Parley, who's one of the top kite foilers on foil boards, and I'm working with a speed windsurfer right now. And also developing a program right now to set up an Olympic kite surfing program for the Dominican Republic. So I've got a lot of irons into the fire, but I just try to keep my life interesting and entertaining. And I live down in Cabarete, Dominican Republic, which is the Maui of the Caribbean. And this week we've had some killer surf, so we've been surfing our asses off, which has been really fun, but there's been no wind. In fact, 2 days ago I went out, it was super offshore, maybe 6 to 20 knots, and I was the only guy that got out and stayed out for 2 hours, and in the end the wind went completely offshore and I swam in. But it's that time of year where the wind could be a little bit unpredictable, but life is good.
I saw some pictures, very nice picture that Mikhail Petrikov took from the North American Speed Challenge, and you were there as a coach, is that right, for the American team?
Yeah, I support Robbie and Robbie Douglas and what we call Team NASP, which is North American Speed Sailing Project. And we started that in 2008 when we made a commitment to get Rob onto the World Cup Speed Series. And then we started trying to break records, outright speed records in sailing, and we're obviously doing it on kitesurf gear. So that was a really fun project because it was totally custom. And basically we were trying to get Rob to his first competition, which was in Fuerteventura, and we literally had gone online and looked at pictures of speedboards of people on podium, and we drew up boards, and we had John Amundsen shape a couple boards for us, ship them off to us, and that started the whole project in 2008. And Rob went to his first event, finished second, damn near won the event, beat the world champion, beat the reigning world champion and the world record holder in his first competition. And that's when we realized that he had some serious potential, and we buckled down and put a lot more energy and work into the R&D and development side of the sport to develop the equipment. So what people don't realize is, what I wanted to really share, which is really fun and exciting in kite surfing, is that this event we just did in Martha's Vineyard, which was an invitational speed event, 14 elite athletes from around the world, with guys like Alex Aguirre, which is an old school windsurfer, great, foil board designer, and makes slalom boards and surfboards and twin tips for kiting. And even this is a guy I used to battle out with Robbie Nash in the waves at Akiva back in the good old days of windsurfing. And then Nico Parley, Maxime Nocher, Alexander Kazagers, came and with the French team, and it was the U.S. team against Europe, and obviously the Douglas clan, which is 3 brothers. There's actually 4 brothers, but 3 of them kite, and they're all big, strong, manly guys that look like football players. But speed kiting started out in kite surfing with speedboards, and now we need over 30 knots to even get on the speedboard because we're riding these custom slalom boards, which very few people have even seen. We use very, very small fins. I won't go into the gory details, but they're around 20 centimeters. The tri-fin setup in the boards, might be 55 to 65 centimeters wide, depending, and with cutouts and some interesting designs. And Rob right now is going 49.69 knots as his top speed on a slalom board.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's like with a 9 or 10 meter kite and like 25 knots of wind, which is crazy. So he's going double the wind speed. Obviously, very, very flat water. But like Alex Casaguera doesn't love the slalom board, keeps giving it a go. But him and Maxime Notre rode foils, and also Nico Parley the whole time. Nico on, sponsored by Ozone, flying protos, and then Alex and Maxime riding the F1 band foils. So it was really interesting to watch the battle between the slalom boards, the speed boards, and the inflatable kites and the foil kites. And that was our first event where we had mixed equipment fighting it out. Rob ended up winning on inflatable kites most of the rounds. I think he lost 3 rounds. He lost. We had 14 rounds of racing, 14 one-hour races. Yeah. And just fun to watch.
That was super nice, and also you got some really nice shot there from Petrikov. It was really nice to see. But I mean, those boards, as you said, they're really extreme. Do you think that the kite world speed record will be on a speed slalom board in the future?
No, it's possible. If Rob's almost doing 50 on a slalom board, and we're just now at the point where we're thinking about getting really crazy, like building asymmetrical one-way slalom boards. So there's definitely a lot more potential. What's amazing is we're starting to see with the efficiency of the race kites that they're starting to supersede what we rode when it was super windy. So if you go to Lüderitz, Namibia, or it's blowing 50 knots somewhere and you're in the south of France where Alex Casaguera broke the record, these guys are not riding race kites in that wind. They're on 5, 6, 7, 8 meter kites. Rob will be on switchblades that have been custom bridled. So we've moved the whole bridle system around so that the kite structurally won't just disintegrate when he sheets it out. Because you can imagine putting up an 8 meter kite in 55 knots of wind. I mean, the average kite, you put it up and it immediately it self-destructs. It won't even hold the structure. Rob weighs about 225 pounds. It's over, like 110 kilos or something. And he's, wearing 35, 40 pounds of wet gear, wetsuits, crash vests, all the padding, the helmets, the harness. And he's a big guy, big, strong boy. So the kites are structurally going through completely different things. Alex, who weighs about 175 compared to Rob, maybe he's 180, relatively small compared to Rob, rides smaller kites, softer boards. He's riding actually a swallowtail speedboard, and then Robbie's riding a hardtail asymmetrical, what we call can opener shape. But to answer your question, the record is not going to be broken on a slalom board because to go over 55 knots average, we need solid 50 knots of wind. And the biggest problem is actually at that point of keeping the slalom board down. I think the slalom board could potentially, with custom kites and customizing the board, I think we get them up to 55 knots. But the scary thing is when these guys crash, when Rob crashes, when he's doing over 50 on the slalom board, the board will rail up like a windsurfer does an accidental back loop. So it'll do a wheelie. The wind will catch the nose. He'll overload the fins. The board will foil up, rail up, and then the board will flip. And he's literally gone through the bottom of his board and broken fins off with his legs and arms and seat. And that he hasn't cut his legs off. I mean, his last crash before NASP, he put a massive gash in his ankle that was just this huge hole, and he had stitches in it. And he took the stitches out, and he just barely survived the event. I mean, these guys they're different humans. They put up with a lot of abuse. So the crashes are pretty gnarly on the slalom board, and that's our biggest fear is the board coming in the face. So it's going to be on the speed boards,
But I mean, you have so much experience from the Olympics. You won a silver medal in 92, and you won a bronze medal 1988 on the Lechner board. And those boards were around 390 long and round boards. I was competing with those boards in Sweden.
They weren't round. They were sort of like a paneled V, like flat on the sides, round in the middle. And we rode the boards asymmetrically on the flat part of the sort of the round bottom. So they almost look like a canoe.
Yeah.
So these boards were incredibly fast in light air and incredibly fast upwind. I mean, they really hauled ass upwind, and then downwind they were really sort of out of control, and it was like log rolling. We used to call it downwind, but the technology of the windsurf gear has really changed. I was heavily involved with the Olympic movement and sort of consider myself sort of the grandfather of the sport. So when I retired in 2000, after my 5th Olympics, there was some push within ISEF to actually kick windsurfing out of the Olympics, because the guys that were, the president of ISEF at the time was not, I won't mention names, but he was just sort of looking for an excuse to remove windsurfing and put another sailing class, because he didn't think it was traditional enough. So I sort of befriended him and I said, hey, what do we have to do to keep it in? He says, well, we need to evolve the equipment so we don't have to pump. And I said, well, it's easy. We just make bigger sails, and we can modernize the equipment with some design evolution to have it sort of represent more of the formula style, which was the most efficient thing in racing. So I was involved with the RSX project and submitted a paper to ISEF with the help of a few other Olympic coaches that was called the white paper, which is similar to the formula that we have for the formula kite surfing. And what we did is we made a box rule. We had all the manufacturers come, and we had a two regatta series, which was a sort of a test event, evaluation event, which I ran for ISEF. And everybody brought their equipment that they thought would be the fastest from 5 to 35 knots of wind, with a limit on the sail size for windsurfing, which was 10 meter at the time. In the end, that we ended up selecting the custom equipment, which was turned in by Neil Pride, which was the RSX. The shaper was the I'm trying to remember the name of the windsurf brand. I can't remember the shaper's name. AHD was the designer from AHD. Actually put in the board. And the board was pretty quick in all conditions, especially in planing conditions. We could get planing, in formula mode in about 8-9 knots of wind. Means you kick the dagger board up and sail around like a windsurfer.
But I mean, what can you bring with your experience there? And now we're talking about kites. We're talking about kite formula. They're talking about youth Olympic. It could be twin tip, board across, slalom, and they also talk about foil. And you have probably read on kiteboarding. Kite racing forum there on Facebook that it has been, people are upset, they are angry, they are happy, but not so many people express that they are happy, because I think it's a progress that is coming closer to the Olympics. But there are a lot of thoughts, ideas and so on. But what is your opinion on this?
Okay, so let's just historically talk about what happened. 2013, there was a mid-year meeting at ISEF. So ISEF, International Sailing Federation, is the governing body which IKA was actually put under. And funny enough, I met Marcus, who runs IKA originally, who started the whole thing. I met him in Lüderitz, Namibia, Africa, because he was our speed guy. He ran the computers and the timing system for our speed events. So we're down there trying to break a world record and sitting around for weeks at a time waiting for the wind. And I had a conversation with him one night over a few beers, and I said, hey, if we wanted to get kite surfing in the Olympics, we need an international federation. And he went home, and 2 weeks later he called me up because, hey, remember that conversation? And he says, I just got something started called IKA, International Kite Surfing Association, and he umbrellaed it and submitted that whole thing under the ISEF umbrella. So that gave someone the power to help regulate and control the sport, which obviously politically caused a lot of chaos originally, because there were multiple tours fighting for world champion status. It was PKRA and KPWT, whatever the heck it was called. There were multiple tours, so that, and then Marcus, because he had the political firepower and the finances behind ISEF to control the labeling of world championships. Well, that was the beginning of the march of kite surfing to get organized. And things still keep changing. PKRA is now Virgin Tour. I mean, they haven't even solidified what they're going to call it. So we're still in those growing pain stages of what we want to do with the future of the sport at the pro and Olympic level. But kite surfing got in the Olympics in 2013, and the problem was it was a vote that happened at the mid-year meeting by council members, which is 36 people that sit on council that represent the collective worldwide body of sailing, as including Olympic sailing, professional sailing, America's Cup, all sitting under ISEF. and the council has a lot of connections with IOC, International Olympic Committee, and kite surfing. International Olympic Committee says we'd love to see kiting in the Olympics. We don't want it to be a judged event, so pure freestyle wouldn't cut it. But if you guys can come up with a format that's, user friendly to viewers and entertaining, exciting. So what we did in 2013, we did an evaluation event for ISEF, which I helped run with Marcus and a few other of the pros that came. We had Damien Leroy and Gunnar and a bunch of Steph Bridges and so all these guys came, and what we did is we put on a show and we showed all the different aspects of kiting, and we showed them we could course race in 4 knots of wind, which they were just completely shocked. We're riding 18-meter kites and 70 centimeter wide race boards and planing in 4 knots of wind. I mean, like doing 15 knots of wind, and they were like in shock. So they said, "Oh my God, we want this in the Olympics for sure." So the mid-year meeting, it got voted in. And unfortunately, the vote was set up in such a way that it kicked Olympic windsurfing out. And windsurfing has been in the Olympics since 1984. There's over 60 federations that have full-time Olympic windsurfing programs. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of athletes, a lot of equipment. So of course, I was happy it got put in the Olympics. In fact, I wasn't even at the mid-year meeting. I was just talking to Marcus on Skype every day, and I was sort of shocked that it was what's called a friendly submission, which means it wasn't sort of a predetermined formal vote. And it was the council that pushed to put kiting in the Olympics early. So I said, "Ooh, Marcus, guess what? There's going to be a big backlash from the Olympic windsurf movement," which there was. We went to the end of the year AGM meeting, which is the big 4-year meeting. And that AGM meeting, all of the countries and federations sent their votes and their proxies to try to reverse the vote, and we ended up having another vote. We had it at the end of the year final AGM meeting, which has never happened. Again, this was every country voting, not just council members and not all the committees, because we went through about 10 days of going through all the committees at the AGM meeting, and the vote stood. But then they did the end of the year General Assembly meeting, and it was, there's 190 countries or whatever represented in.
Who have invested much in this sport.
And they reversed the vote, which, honorably was the right thing to do, because it was sort of I wouldn't call it cheating, but it was a sort of a sneak attack by council to push their agenda, which is to promote the sides of sailing that they think will keep them in the Olympic movement. Just so people know, sailing, many of the less modern sports in the Summer Olympic movement are on the chopping blocks, because the IOC, International Olympic Committee, wants to make the Olympics more like the X Games. They want it to be more fresh, more youthful, more younger, more extreme. And obviously kiting for sailing is the #1 sell and would be, getting a lot of attention on TV.
But how can this be extreme? And we talk about formula. Now I think it's just weeks or days until they will decide the format for the Youth Olympics. But in what way do you think this could be more extreme than regular sailing?
Well, I think the extreme is in the performance. So, for example, when you watch the America's Cup sailing, it may or may not be extreme, but they're doing 45 knots and 15 knots of wind, and the foil boards, for example, are getting close to that sort of performance. Just like you mentioned, there's something called the Youth Olympic Games, which the third rendition of it is coming in 2018. That's called YOG, Youth Olympic Games, and that's 15 to 18-year-old kids, I think, is the age group, and very few people actually know there's something called the Youth Olympic Games. So that's a new movement under the International Olympic Committee's umbrella of Winter and Summer Olympics. So it's the third sort of smaller Olympics. It's focused more on social and education. It's not so much about performance and results, but that's changing quickly. But now that kiting has been guaranteed Olympic medals for the Youth Olympic Games, now countries and federations are starting to go, okay, now we got to make an Olympic kite surfing program. And kiting is not an Olympic sport yet, but we're pushing hard for it to get into 2020 Olympics, just so the collective audience that's following the whole storyline understands kiting is the only non-Olympic event that's in ISEF World Cup stops. So that's a pretty good sign that ISEF and IOC are really pushing to get kiting in the Olympics for 2020, which will be in Tokyo. It'll have to be done in such a way that it won't be able to displace an existing Olympic class. So, and I think as soon as it is voted in Olympics, there's going to be a huge rush and an investment of people, figuring out if they want to, campaign. And I think it'll blow that side of the sport up. But like you mentioned, the discipline, the actual event, the equipment that's going to be used, there's a working party committee that's trying to decide exactly what they think would be the ultimate benevolent way to exhibit the sport. So we're still getting that solidified right now.
But I mean, there has been this box rules, and I think people are pretty happy about it. Also, the producers could be involved and I mean do business on it. But if you also look into the X Games, are there one design in X Games in any class?
I don't think it'll be one design. I think it'll be sort of a manufacturer's control class, sort of like Formula kiting. It could still be the Formula board, or it could. Most likely, what's going to have to be decided is what's the exact format for racing. So, course racing, when you go upwind for 2 miles and then go straight downwind, is not as exciting as something short track or enduro or sort of a mix of course racing and slalom, which we've done these events where we've actually shown that side of the sport to ISEF, and actually when you do it, it's really fun, and it's a lot more action. There's more crashing, more at the marks. More, obviously lead changing is happening, and then you can mix in things like jumps with like an obstacle, a floating tube that you've got to jump over on a reach, and that might be something that gets it gets turned into that, so it's a little more entertaining than just watching people blast upwind and try to go 1% faster, which is to a certain extent is quite boring.
But the other sailing class, you talk about Lechner, RXS, and so on, and there's also been some pictures now on potential Neil Pride equipment on the social media, on Facebook.
I mean, it's funny.
ISF, but what do you think? But aren't there most one design class now in the sailing? Why should it be a box rule if it's just one design on the other classes?
Well, the box rule allows for more manufacturers to support the sport, because if kite surfing is really small. I mean, right now making foil kites, where there's maybe 5 companies that have registered race foil kites. I think it's Fly Surfer, Ozone, F1, Elf, and then there's probably 1 or 2 other companies that actually make paragliders that might have a registered kite. I haven't looked at the list lately, but if you don't have a foil kite right now for racing, it's over. You can't win course racing on Formula kite boards or a foil board without having a foil kite. I mean, these things are so efficient. They have incredible low end, incredible top end, and they go straight the hell upwind. They're really fast around the course. If it's a one design, then you end up getting it's very fair because everybody can have access to the same equipment, and now it's purely down to the rider. But you find that the equipment fits a very specific weight and size of rider. For the Olympic windsurfers, they're all around 75 kilos, and the taller the better. So the guy that won the gold medal in the last Olympics, Dorian from the Netherlands, he's like 6'6", 175, 180 pounds, maybe a little bit lighter at light air regattas. But so he's a real tall, skinny guy, and you're going to see that in kiting, if we went one design, you'd see a very specific size of athlete. But if we leave it open or a limited open, which was something, someone would call it a measurement class or a box rule class, then you'd have 4 or 5 manufacturers that can produce equipment, and they keep pushing the development of the sport. That side of everything hasn't been solidified. So, for example, in windsurfing right now, it's a box rule. You have to use series production equipment, registered equipment by manufacturers, and that's what's going on with Formula. I think there's a lot of people that sort of have this impression that the manufacturers somehow have an inside ear to ISEF. If somebody makes a submission for equipment or for a class to be changed or modified, then it's got to go through the political process. And I got a lot of heat when we changed the Olympic equipment to RSX, and people are like, "Oh, Neil Pride just paid you off," and I didn't even get paid to do the work from ISEF. The evaluation trials, and we had Starboard, we had Gastra, we had Exoset, we had a number of manufacturers submit prototype equipment for evaluation. And what we did is we literally raced it head to head, and the RSX, which is the fastest board, the sail combination in all conditions, ended up becoming the Olympic board. And then I actually, after the equipment was selected, then I actually got a contract with Neil Pride to run around and do clinics at the events, because the equipment was so new that most of the sailors didn't even know how to tune it and test it. So I spent 6 months running around at all these big events, sort of teaching people how to, to sail the stuff. Kiting, it's still not solidified what will be the class. ISEF likes the box rule because it keeps multiple manufacturers involved. It keeps the development of the sport. So, I think within the political movement to get kiting in the Olympics, we're going to push for it to not be one design. But it is up to the class. To keep in mind, kite surfing is like windsurfing was 30 years ago. It's such a young sport that there's a lot of sideline armchair sailors, or that sit there and bitch and complain. Oh, we don't want kiting in the Olympics. It's not going to be cool. Well, most people that kite race are not doing freestyle. They're riding waves on occasion. So there's many different aspects of the sport and different factions. So, and even the guys sitting on the top right now, get Johnny Heineken, Nico Parley, Maxime Nocher. There's a good chance that these guys will be beaten and superseded by the guys that by the time it becomes an Olympic sport in 2020, most likely.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if they're even the guys that'll be competing for the countries.
Oh, interesting. But what do you think? Have you been following the discussion on kiteboard racing forum lately? Have you seen the discussion? It's been pretty tough discussion. What is your opinion about that?
Yeah, well, I think kiting would be a fantastic sport to add to the Olympics. Politically and logistically, you've got to sort of refine the competition format and obviously the equipment selection choices. I'm pushing for it to be as fun and as entertaining and high performance as possible. So more like the X Games. So I'm not a big fan of just going upwind, downwind, sort of boring course racing. I'd like to see maybe it can be fleet racing, and then the final is more short track, where it's like a 6-minute race, winner take all. So even the format for the finals is in sailing has been changed. So you can be dominating a regatta, go to the final, and if you don't win the final or you're not top 3, you're gonna have a hard time winning a medal. So, and that's how track and field is. That's how the X Games is. You can win every heat. You go to the final and you false start. Yep. You don't even make the final. So winner take all sort of pressure, which makes it for very entertaining drama. Yeah. Top guys get a little freaked out about it, but the most elite athletes, the guys that end up winning, they're gonna thrive in that environment and produce the results. So I think it'll be a good show once it gets in.
Will you be involved in the future now for kite racing and the Olympics?
I would be involved with helping to steer the direction of the sport where it's as egalitarian as possible. We have as many people participating, and obviously I'll help the countries and the athletes as a coach and somebody's to mentor the whole process to move forward. And I mean that's sort of that's my vocation now. So I'm hoping to coach somebody in the Olympics in 2020.
Yeah, cool.
2018. Yeah, the Youth Olympics. I'm hoping to coach someone, which would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think they know who they're going to call right now.
Yeah,
but that's cool. Are you also involved in any brands right now? Working with any brands?
I'm working with Axis right now, and we've got some interesting projects with speedboards in the works, and obviously a bunch of surfboards and slalom boards. So we're sort of sitting on the sidelines and figuring out how to put some equipment into production that makes the sport more accessible for people. The NASP Speed event, which we did this fall in the Vineyard, Robbie Douglas's event, that was sponsored by the Black Dog and Bill Lynch, our benevolent kite surf sponsor. What was cool is F1 actually has 2 production speedboards. They got a port and starboard tack board, so Axis is interested to do a similar thing. So you can go to a store and buy a production speedboard, and same thing with slalom boards right now. I don't even think there's only a few manufacturers. We get our boards custom built from Mike's lab. Mike Zychek, who's a good buddy of mine, that built my boards as a pro windsurfer, and he's been building Rob's speedboards for us, and also our slalom boards. And then you get Team Viento and 1 or 2 other guys sort of playing with slalom boards. But there's even a possibility Youth Olympic Games ends up being something that's more appropriate to ride a slalom board than a course board. So the sport is young and a lot of development going on.
What is your recommendation to the young people sitting there and hoping for the Youth Olympics 2018?
Well, it's a done deal. It's just the format's going to be solidified. Obviously you've got to get fit, and you've got to learn how to, fly foil kites and race kites. And you got to be able to be competent on a speedboard, a slalom board, a surfboard, and obviously a formula board. The best athletes can ride everything. I mean, Maxime Nocher, Nico Parley, the guys that I'm coaching at speed, these guys, when it gets windy, you watch them go out on a twin tip or a speedboard, a slalom board, it doesn't matter, foil board, they can They've got incredible skills, and because they ride so much different equipment, they're literally asked to make the kite do completely different things that, for example, will never happen on a twin tip.
Yeah.
So when you ride a race board or Formula Kite race board or a foil board, the kite will literally go and do things that you're sort of dumbfounded. It will never happen on even a surfboard or a twin tip. So building your base of working knowledge to be able to make the equipment work no matter what, in all conditions. And then, for example, to be able to kite in 4 knots. People are like, oh, you can't kite in 4 knots. Well, if you live in a windy spot, I live in Cabarete, and most guys won't go out on a bigger kite than 10 meter. And I go out all the time in like 6 knots on a 10 meter in my surfboard, and I've got impeccable kite skills. And I realize I make one mistake on a wave or the timing of, trying to get over a big pile of white water, and I go down and you're swimming, So, but you can get good enough where you can sail, I can sail a 10 meter in, ridiculously overpowered conditions, sometimes squalls to 40 knots or something and survive. Yeah. And then, down 4 or 5 knots, I can survive with the same kite. So, and that's because of my sailing background and my windsurfing background, learning how to read weather and, working with tide and every piece of chop and every swell and working with currents and, wind shifts and playing the angles, what happens as the wind comes off the land. So this is the sort of thing that you've got to develop when you want to become a well-rounded, elite, professional, wind-generated, wind-powered athlete.
Yeah. Privately, something is going to happen in 7, 8 months?
Privately, oh yeah. Well, we've got the next generation Olympic pro kite windsurfer coming. I've got a baby en route, so we're playing with that right now, keeping us busy.
That's cool. Who do you think I should do a podcast with next?
Good question. I think you'd have a lot of fun talking to Robbie Douglas. Getting a little more into the gory details, and then Alex Cazagueras. Yeah. Probably I still can't pronounce his last name properly, so excuse me, Alex, for destroying it. He's also known as Little Al, and Big Al is Alex Aguera, but we call him the Little Prince. But these guys are fantastic. Robbie and Alex, the 2 top kiters. I mean, the third fastest gentleman is Sebastian Catalan, who runs the Luderitz Speed event, which is mostly for windsurfers in Namibia, Africa, which they just finished. But Rob and Alex will probably do another record attempt in the spring. And
where?
It'll be in the south of France. So Alex is sponsored by VW, Volkswagen in Europe, and also F1. So he's actually got a contract where they give him the funding to keep a speed event, a speed ditch or a trench area sort of functioning, which is a bit of a project.
Wow.
So it's doing it in the Camargue in the south of France, which has classically been where the French have dug their ditches and trenches and broken the world speed records. Yeah. And they have the Meltem and the Mistral wind that blow down in that region. And, it'll blow 50, a couple times a week. Yeah. Obviously very cold, and what you're looking for is the perfect angle and very, very flat water. So you need a barrier trench or at least a wall of dirt, sand, whatever. Alex's speed trench is not really a trench. It's a speed spot that's built into the salt flats where they make baleen. I think it's baleen salt. Okay. And he has access to some private property, and you got to bring a timing crew in and set up a 500-meter course. Wow. And then wait for it to get really frickin' windy, and then you got to be nuts enough to put a 7-meter kite up and gust to 60 and they run about 2 feet off of this basically dirt wall. You get 10 feet off the wall, and you got 6 inches of chop, which you can't even ride in. So they have to stay in this sort of manicured, perfectly flat water. And like water skiing, if it's perfectly flat, then you can control the kite and you can edge and run about 140, 145 degrees off the wind angle and just absolutely smoke down the course. And to let you know, the fastest a kite's gone ever, I think, is 63.5, 63.7 knots. So if that's the spike top speed, then there's a good possibility that they can hold that speed. They just need absolutely perfect wind and wind angle and perfectly flat water.
Super. Okay, but thank you very much. I think it was very interesting. Your experience was really, really interesting, and also looking ahead and your ideas there. So thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Hopefully you didn't talk too fast for you guys.
That's cool. Okay, but I think it was really good, and I will use this video. This is the first time I do a video podcast over Skype. All right. So
well, hopefully my hair looked good, you know. So
yeah.
spent all working on my, all morning working on my hair. So if anybody'd like to catch up with me on Facebook, I have Gebhardt Performance Riding, which is my kite windsurf coaching page, and then obviously Michael Gebhardt. And my Facebook page for health coaching is called Natural Health Mentoring. So that's the best way for people to kind of keep track of what I'm into and what's all the fun stuff we're into. So God bless.